And a dream cycle is only as good as the cosmetic appearance and strength gains that you're going to get from it, right? You don't want this cycle to turn into a cluster of additional surgery. Vigorous Steve here with a theoretical dream cycle I've been fantasizing about now for the last couple of months. It's not a cycle I have any intention of running myself. It's just something I've been thinking about and compiling into one last cycle containing all of the information that I know myself. It's more of a cycle. Let's say if I had a time machine, I would be able to go back in time and coach myself. This is something I would recommend to myself so I can forego all of this experimentation that I've been doing over the last 20 years or so that I've been bodybuilding and trying to actively figure out what works best for my body. I've come to a very short list of compounds that worked very well for me. So instead of going through all of that experimentation of trying compounds like Primobolan, Masterone, Nandrolone, etc., instead of going through all of that experimentation, I will be able to hire myself as a coach and guide myself down a journey of success. So this is the theoretical dream cycle that I've composed for myself after undergoing this bodybuilding journey for over 20 years, of which I've been using steroids for the last 10 years or so. Maybe it's something you can learn from. So this is a cycle for educational purposes. I'm pretty happy where I am right now, running about 600 milligrams of anabolic androgenic steroids combined per week. I'll put my current cycle on the screen right here so you guys know exactly what I'm running. It hasn't really changed for the last couple of weeks. I'm happy where I am. Being around 100 kilos, reasonably strong, maybe 80%, 85% of my previous all-time strongest when I was running much higher dosages than I'm running right now. Now, as you can see from this cycle update, I've been trialing Turkesterone and Ecdysterone for the last couple of weeks now. I wanted to figure out if these compounds offer any additional benefits for people who use anabolic androgenic steroids. Now, we already know, and it's well documented, that Turkesterone and Ecdysteroids are very beneficial for otherwise drug-free athletes. So we can call them drug-free because Turkesterone and Ecdysterone are not on the WADA doping list of 2022, and they don't downregulate your HPTA like SARMs or anabolic steroids do. So you see that your testosterone, your estradiol, your sex hormone-binding globulin levels are all sustained when you run Turkesterone or Ecdysterone solo. That's all well documented, that they don't potentiate any liver stress or downregulate the HPTA. But there's not so much data out there so far whether Turkesterone and Ecdysteroids are beneficial for people who use very potent performance-enhancing drugs in the form of actual steroids or selective androgen receptor modulators, which I'm not really a big fan of. A couple months ago, maybe over a year ago, I tried Turkesterone myself during a post-cycle therapy or shortly after and figured out that Turkesterone at approximately 300 milligrams per day equals about 2.5 milligrams of Anavar when it comes to the overall strength gain and recovery capability that increases by running these compounds. And I saw a similar result by my wife. Tried Turkesterone at 200 milligrams per day. So that's 4 to 6 capsules of Turkesterone from Gorilla Mind. That's complex with the hydroxypropyl beta-cyclodextrin, increasing its bioavailability. And I've been trialing 6 capsules of Ecdysterone from Intelligent Elephant, also complexed with the hydroxypropyl beta-cyclodextrin. It's a mouthful to pronounce. Right, so these have a higher bioavailability compared to the other Turkesterone and Ecdysterone products that are out there on the market. Of course, I did my blood work. I did my blood work before, after I finished the 3 weeks of Turkesterone, and I will do my blood work about 2 weeks from now when I finish the 3 weeks on Ecdysterone and then give my final thoughts on how beneficial they can be or completely ineffective they are for people using anabolic androgenic steroids. Now, I already have my before and after blood work results, and it is of note that my sex hormone-binding globulin came up from 9 nanomoles per liter up to 15 nanomoles per liter. So that's a significant increase considering that I'm still running the same dose of testosterone and Primobolan. Now, as we all know, dihydrotestosterone derivatives are very potent in reducing your SHBG levels. Masterone, Primobolan, Anavar, Winstrol, and of course Proviron is horrible for your SHBG levels, but it might still have some practical applications if your SHBG is chronically elevated. In my case, being on cycle for that long and discontinuing the raloxifene, my SHBG ended up at 9, which is quite low. Ideally have it around 20 nanomoles per liter. And it's important to keep your SHBG somewhat in range while using dihydrotestosterone derivatives because SHBG, when bound to the SHBG receptor complex, when there's a steroid molecule inside, it potentiates additional anabolism by increasing cyclic adenosine monophosphate concentrations within skeletal muscle. And this acts as a cofactor when steroids attach to the androgen receptor, transcribing the DNA into RNA, which ultimately leads into protein synthesis. And this is where most of the anabolism comes from. So by optimizing another pathway besides the androgen receptor, we can create additional anabolism. We don't only have to hammer the androgen receptors with steroids or SARMs, we can get additional anabolism through the estrogen beta receptor and through the sex hormone-binding globulin receptor complex. And for that, we need to have sex hormone-binding globulin in the bloodstream. Now, of course, the dihydrotestosterone will ultimately reduce that to a very great extent, especially at higher dosages. But from the data that I've collected so far, at least turkesterone is able to raise and sustain sex hormone-binding globulin concentrations while running 375 milligrams of Primobolan per week on top of approximately 235 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week. So even though it might be a little bit presumptuous to say what the benefits of turkesterone and ecdysteroids are going to be because the experiment hasn't concluded, for now I can say that at least with the before and after blood work results of this 3-week turkesterone experiment without making any changes to my actual cycle, I can say that it acts as an ancillary to make the anabolic androgenic steroids that I'm taking right now more effective. So I feel that whereas turkesterone might act as 2.5 milligrams or 5 milligrams of Anavar in the past when running that solo without any anabolic androgenic steroids in the picture, right now it feels like more. Is it more than 5 milligrams Anavar? Maybe 7.5 milligrams of Anavar per day? Give or take, right? It's hard to pinpoint without making a direct comparison to Anavar, which I might add in after running this experiment for maybe 1 or 2 weeks to see if I get any additional anabolism from running a dose of 5 milligrams of Anavar per day after I finish the Ecdysterone. So keeping all of that in mind, for now I'm going to say that turkesterone and potentially Ecdysterone is a very potent ancillary to make your cycle more effective. And keeping this new data in mind, designing this dream cycle that we're going to discuss right now, I did add that in because I do feel that it has a very good potential to optimize every little vector, which is something I like to do going forward. So with that out of the way, let's finally get into this dream cycle, shall we? The base of my cycle, of any cycle of most people all over the world, is going to be testosterone. If you have an issue with testosterone, your individual genetic makeup prevents you from having good results or too much side effects from testosterone, go somewhere else. This cycle will have a testosterone base. For me, personally, I prefer testosterone enanthate because my individual carboxyl esterases, which are the enzymes which metabolize ester from a anabolic androgenic steroid, whether that's testosterone or Primo or Trenbolone, whatever, my individual carboxyl esterases seem to prefer the enanthate ester, giving me the most stable serum concentrations regardless of injection frequency or carrier oil. Now, personally, I prefer castor oil, allowing for biweekly or every other day administrations, because again, castor oil metabolizes from the injection depot quite slowly compared to an MCT oil or a cottonseed or a grapeseed oil or this synthetic shit that I never want to put in my body, being ethyl oleate propylene glycol, etc., etc., etc. During the off season, I would run dosages between 150 to approximately 500 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week. And during a cutting phase, those dosages would go up, considering that my caloric intake would come down to facilitate fat loss, right? And my energy expenditure would go up by doing more cardio, or maybe stand at my desk instead of sitting down. And the dosages would range between maybe 350, 500 to up to 1,000 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week. In the past, I've ran up to 2,000 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week, which was a great cycle in a caloric deficit, considering I was just running test and an aromatase inhibitor. Going forward for my ideal dream cycle, I would prefer not to use an aromatase inhibitor because it's an extra compound that could negatively affect your lipid levels. And again, since the additional anabolic androgenic steroid is going to be Primo, I don't need an aromatase inhibitor. Now, we'll get back to the Primo a little bit later, because besides the testosterone enanthate being the foundation and the base of this cycle, I would run 250 to 500 IUs ACG 3 times per week to sustain testicular function. Right now, I'm using 250 IUs ACG 3 times per week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But I think at higher dosages, when I'm running a decent amount of test and a decent amount of Primo combined, I would need a little bit more ACG to sustain testicular function. Now, some of this exogenous testosterone can actually enter the testicles and start spermatogenesis within the Sertoli cells. Personally, I've noticed that beyond 500 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week, where my testicle size seemed to increase, and so did my semen volume. Now, some people notice that beyond 750 or 1,000 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week, some people never notice this at all, or maybe they're running a Primobolan or Nandrolone or other progestogenic 19-nor, which is basically an injectable contraceptive, right? Besides its potent anabolic effects, it also acts as a very potent contraceptive. So, personally, I can run ACG up until 500 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week, after which I feel that it's no longer beneficial to stimulate testicular function because there's too much exogenous androgens in the bloodstream, and some of them could potentially end up in the testicles, starting spermatogenesis. So I would run 250 to 500 IUs ACG up until a point I feel my testosterone dose is too high, which I can also detect from my blood work, seeing that my DHEA sulfate and pregnenolone sulfate concentrations are coming down because the ACG is no longer acting on the adrenal gland to produce these neurosteroids. So as these levels come down and I feel that my testosterone levels are going up due to exogenous administrations, I will take the ACG out because, again, I get some spermatogenesis through the exogenous testosterone that I'm taking, and I would replace the ACG with 50 milligrams DHEA and 25 milligrams pregnenolone because the adrenal glands will produce less and less and less and less of these neurosteroid concentrations in the bloodstream, which will affect a whole cascade of biological pathways, including memory formation and energy levels. And I believe that DHEA also has a little bit of a regulatory role in glucose metabolism, right? So I want to keep these neurosteroid concentrations as optimal as possible. If testosterone is over the reference range and my estradiol levels are somewhere towards the top or slightly over the reference range, ideally, I keep these neurosteroids towards the middle top of the reference range as well. And for me, splitting up the dose to 25 milligrams DHEA and 12.5 milligrams pregnenolone in the morning and in the evening seems to sustain my neurosteroid concentrations in the bloodstream the best. Right? So when I remove the ACG, I transition into supplemental DHEA and pregnenolone. This is the foundation of my cycle. Works very, very well whether I'm 27 years old or now 38 years old. On top of that, to facilitate more anabolism, I would add in Primobolan. Now, in this case, because I'm running either ACG or DHEA, which all contributes to serum estradiol concentrations, ACG produces that directly in the testicles, and DHEA ultimately converts into estradiol, whether that's in the liver or in the peripheral tissue, right, after it converts into testosterone. So serum estradiol levels will go up. And that's why when I add in the Primobolan, it's not going to be in a 1-to-1 ratio, but in a slightly higher concentration. So when I run 150 milligrams to 500 milligrams testosterone enanthate, I would run anywhere between 125 to 750 milligrams Primobolan on top. So it's not exactly in a 1-to-1 ratio. As the testosterone is going up, and I might potentially use a higher dose of ACG, resulting in higher estradiol concentrations, the Primobolan is going up a little bit more disproportionately to the testosterone enanthate. So I might use 150 milligrams testosterone enanthate plus 125 milligrams Primobolan. Seems to give me a serum estradiol concentration when using 250 IUs ACG 3 times per week of approximately 40 to 45 picograms per milliliter. As the testosterone is going up and potentially the ACG, the Primobolan dosages are going up slightly higher to compensate for this increased aromatization that I would otherwise get from the exogenous testosterone and the direct estradiol production in the testicles by raising the dose of ACG. And again, for me individually, I don't get so much aromatization from taking supplemental DHEA. So as my testosterone enanthate dose would exceed 500 milligrams, maybe even 1,000 milligrams per week, I would rather run 50 milligrams DHEA per day because I get less aromatization from that dose compared to 500 IUs ACG raising my serum estradiol concentrations. So again, in that early stages of this off-season cycle using ACG, the Primobolan dose is disproportionately higher to the testosterone dose, so it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. Let's say this ratio goes from 1 to 0.8 on the test and the Primo up to 1 to 1.5 test and Primo. Again, I will do my blood work every time I make a change, as I always do. So it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint how much testosterone and Primo I will have to use every increment that I'm making a change to the cycle. But I will always go with blood work. So I'm just giving you a little bit of a ballpark on how these ratios are going to change. But again, after years of experimentation, the short list is now so short that I'm limiting myself to testosterone enanthate and Methenolone enanthate. And I have no interest in running Nandrolone or Trenbolone or whatever else on top. Right? So this is the 2 anabolic androgenic steroids that I'm considering to inject. Maybe in a blue moon, if my knees and elbows are really starting to hurt and I can't facilitate any more recovery from using a TB500 or the BPC157 or other healing peptides and proper deep tissue massage therapy and deloads whenever needed, I would consider 50 milligrams of Nandrolone, and whether that's NPP or Nandrolone Decanoate. I might consider that in the late future, but not in the immediate future, because up until now, I feel that I don't need 50 milligrams or even a therapeutic dose of 100 milligrams Nandrolone per week to keep my knee integrity and my elbow integrity somewhat intact. I'm old, but not that old, just quite yet. Now, that being said, if there ever comes a point in time where I do feel that I need a therapeutic dose of Nandrolone, I will replace some of the testosterone that I was taking in this cycle with Nandrolone. So let's say I ended up at 500 milligrams testosterone enanthate and 750 milligrams Primobolan per week. I would replace 500 milligrams of test with 450 milligrams of test and 50 milligrams of Nandrolone. Or maybe 400 test and 100 milligrams of Nandrolone per week, right? Because Nandrolone promotes the conversion of testosterone into estradiol, because Nandrolone is an intermediary hormone present predominantly in the aromatase enzyme when testosterone converts into estradiol, and taking exogenous Nandrolone seems to act as a catalyst or a cofactor in this conversion process. So I would not take the Nandrolone on top of this cycle. I would instead replace some of the testosterone for Nandrolone to make sure that my estradiol stays in range. And again, I might have to reduce the testosterone a little bit more, maybe ending up at 400 milligrams testosterone enanthate and 50 milligrams Nandrolone per week with the 750 milligrams Primobolan and the 250 or 500 IUs ACG alongside of that. Because again, estradiol you don't want too high, and when you have a progesterogenic compound in the picture, you certainly don't want the estradiol too high, even if you already did your gynecomastia surgery, because the last thing I would want is for gynecomastia to return because they left a little bit of breast tissue intact to prevent the chest from caving inwards or the nipple from caving inwards. And this a little bit of Nandrolone is potent enough to stimulate gynecomastia formation when estradiol is a little bit too high. Again, you have to keep all of these things into consideration, and a dream cycle is only as good as the cosmetic appearance and strength gains that you're going to get from it, right? You don't want this cycle to turn into a clusterfuck of additional surgery. So again, maybe that's in the picture, but for now I'm going to forego the Nandrolone while designing this dream cycle. But never say never, right? Now, that pretty much covers the anabolic androgenic steroids. Again, I've already alluded to Turkesterone and Ecdysteroids, which is something I would consider to add in during the off-season, considering that the testosterone and Primobolan dose is not too high. Now, of course, if you're running 1,000 milligrams of test and 1,000 milligrams of Primo and DHEA Pregnenolone supplementation alongside of that, I don't think there's any way to sustain your SHBG levels, not with raloxifene or tamoxifen or clomiphene or another selective estrogen receptor modulator, not by keeping your estradiol super high to the point you're risking gynecomastia, so that's 75 to 100 picograms per milliliter. If you're running a gram of Primo, your SHBG will be low. If you're running a ton of Masterone or Proviron, your SHBG is going to be low. So I feel that the addition of Turkesterone or Ecdysterone at 300 milligrams of either should be a beneficial up until a certain dose of a dihydrotestosterone derivative. What that dose is, I'm unsure of. Whether that's 375 milligrams of Primo, 500 milligrams of Primo per week, 750 milligrams of Primo per week, I'm not entirely sure. But until SHBG is sustained, I would consider to add in 300 milligrams turkesterone, split that over 2 servings, 3 capsules in the morning, 3 capsules in the evening, because I don't feel that I get a boosting effect like I do from Anavar or Superdrol or another anabolic androgenic steroids you could take in a pre-workout setting. I don't notice that boost from turkesterone or Ecdysteroid, so I would simply space them out over 2 servings 12 hours apart, 8 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock in the evening, for example, for as long as SHBG concentrations are sustained. And then I would consider maybe 25 milligrams of Anavar 1 time per week, pre-workout, taken sublingually, let's say 20 minutes, 30 minutes before the workout. I would take 25 milligrams Anavar sublingually in an attempt to increase this lagging body part. So in my case, that's going to be quads. I have a separate quad day and a separate hamstring day. I feel that my hamstrings are very well developed, as are my adductors and calves. But my quads, well, they always need some work. So on this single day that I do my quad workout with calves afterwards, I would take 25 milligrams of Anavar pre-workout sublingually. And the other 6 days of the week, whether that's a workout day or a rest day, I would supplement with about 300 milligrams turkesterone or Ecdysterone to sustain my SHBG levels and get additional recovery and anabolism through the estrogen beta receptor pathway, and by keeping my SHBG levels sustained so I can get some additional anabolism through the sexual hormone-binding globulin receptor complex. Now, when the dreadful day comes that I still have single-digit sexual hormone-binding globulin levels, and there's no way to increase that, besides recombinant SHBG, which is on the market, but unobtainable as of now, that would be great. Recombinant injectable sexual hormone-binding globulin to keep your SHBG as high as possible to potentiate this anabolism that you're otherwise missing out of because SHBG levels are declining rapidly at these high dosages of Primo. So let's say I end up with single digits, like 5 nanomoles per liter or 9 nanomoles per liter as it was a couple weeks ago. Let's say I end up there and the Primobolan dose and the testosterone dose is so high. Well, it's already broken, so I might as well add in the Anavar on a daily basis and stick with about 10 milligrams to 25 milligrams of Anavar, which seems to be the highest tolerable dose I would be able to take. So it'll be 1,000 milligrams a test, 1,000 milligrams of Primobolan per week with the supplemental DHEA and Pregnenolone. I would run 25 milligrams of Anavar sublingually 5 times per week. Now, if there comes a point in time where I feel I need more recovery, let's say somewhere midway a cutting phase where the calories are so restrictive that I don't get so much recovery from the calories alone because I'm trying to facilitate fat loss. And as a result, to compensate, the anabolic androgenic steroids would need to come up to facilitate more anabolism and recovery from this limited amount of food that I'm eating. And in that case, I might take 25 milligrams of Anavar on my rest days as well, split AM and PM at half the dose, 12.5 milligrams in the morning and in the evening. And if really push comes to shove and my leg workouts are really starting to suffer, my quad-specific workouts, then I might replace 25 milligrams of Anavar with 25 or 30 milligrams of Superdrol, taken once per week. Again, this is toward the end of a cutting phase where you're getting overly depleted, doing a ton of cardio to reduce the body fat levels to very desirable levels. But in most of the cases, that really takes away from your leg drive and leg strength. And supplementing or switching to 30 milligrams of Superdrol instead of the Anavar should give an immediate effect on that quad-specific workouts with a single administration, right? You could take that sublingually pre-workout 20 minutes, 30 minutes as well. But you will get a noticeable boost over taking a similar dose of Anavar. So I might take my Superdrol once a week, and then the other 6 days of the week, 25 milligrams of Anavar. On my rest days, I would split up the dose to keep up with its half-life. Again, don't expect this cycle to happen. I might take certain aspects of this dream cycle and incorporate that over the next couple of weeks or months that this cycle that I'm on right now is going to last for, after which I have my gynecomastia surgery scheduled. For personalized advice, you can always consider to schedule a consultation. You can find the rates in the consultation section. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at VigorSteve. Have a look at my Vigorous to the Max YouTube clips workout video channel, where all of my personal bests, my insane working sets are uploaded. Maybe you get inspired. Maybe you get some ideas to take your working sets to the next level also. So please subscribe there as well so you can grind and grimace your way through your next workout just like I do. Have a look at my link tree down below to find discount codes for all the sponsors and affiliates that I'm associated with. If you're looking for over-the-counter supplement XYZ, there's probably a link and a discount code for it. I produced an entire article for this specific purpose on my website. It's called the Ultimate Control F Source List. So if you're looking for any of the supplements which I discussed in this video or other videos which are in this YouTube channel, have a look there. And now you can save yourself some money in the process and support yours truly, because obviously I'm going to get a kickback. I had full transparency on this YouTube channel. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A front double bicep for you guys. This is how we're starting 2022. Hopefully we can improve a little bit beyond this point. But I'm not expecting too much because, well, 100 kilos is 100 kilos. And it's more than enough for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully daily from this point onwards, because I'm recharged, ready to roll.